Hello and welcome to the Red Special Guitar Podcast with me, John Underhill. Today I am lucky to be sat on a sofa with Simon Lupton, who has been involved with Queen for many years. I think you sound old.
Yeah, I am old. I am old.
You've been involved in Queen for quite a while now. I met Simon a couple of times-ish through a couple of events, and Simon's graciously agreed to be on the podcast today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm in exalted company. I'm who else you've talked to, so I'm very honoured.
No, well, thanks for coming on. It's it's never easy getting hold of people, and I Instagrammed you and you got back to me, so I'm very pleased that you actually took the time to get back to me.
It doesn't often work, but it's nice when it does, isn't it?
Yeah. So Simon, for those of I obviously know who you are, and you know who you are, but for those of you that don't, I mentioned you've been involved with Queen for a long time. Where did that start for you, your journey with Queen?
Okay, so my journey, the journey with Queen really began when I was a teenager, which is when I discovered them. So that was in the mid-80s, when I suddenly realised who Queen were. And I've been a fan ever since. And it's one of those weird things, I think a lot of people find that is you discover Queen and you go, oh wow, this is an amazing band. And then you realise you've always known, because I went back through the records that I had, and there was at least 3 Queen records in my collection, but I just hadn't made that connection between the songs and who they were. And what's nice about when you discover Queen later is you then go on this incredible journey of discovery back through all the albums. So that's what I went on and just consumed everything. And all the videos you could get, all the concerts and so forth. But the only sad thing was I came just that little bit too late, so I never got to see them live with Fred. Kind of made up for it since, but anyway. But at that time, it was sort of, I was really hoping that they would go on tour again and I'd get to see them, but of course they never did. So stayed being a fan, joined the fan club, went to a convention and all of that, which was great. And then it was at the turn of the century. I was working at the BBC because I'd followed a career in television, mainly comedy at the time, but scripted production. And I was working for the BBC and I was making a sitcom for the very new BBC Three. It just launched, called Fun at the Funeral Parlour, which was written and starred a very talented young guy called Rhys Thomas. And we discovered that he was a Queen fan too, so we both discovered that we had this shared love, and there were lots of references in the first series to Queen that we'd hidden in there that made us laugh, and anyone who was a Queen fan hopefully got them, but most people probably didn't. And then we came to do the second series. We were having guest stars come in each episode, and Anita Dobson very kindly agreed to guest star in one of the episodes. And she was lovely to work with. She was absolutely brilliant. And she had confessed that the reason she'd said yes to doing it was because Brian had seen the first series and thought it was funny and helped her learn her lines and was sort of a fan of the show. So this emboldened Rhys and I, and we decided that we would cheekily ask if Brian would do the theme tune, so that for the second series we could have a new theme tune played by Brian on his guitar, because it was Fun at the Funeral Parlour. We wanted the funeral march played on the Red Special. So we contacted Phil Symes, who is PR for Queen, and put in the request, and he was very kind and said, look, Brian's phenomenally busy. He gets asked all sorts of things and he says no to pretty much everything because he's too busy. But he likes to know what he's been asked, so I will, of course, forward on your request. And so it went to him, and then we didn't hear anything for a few weeks, and then suddenly I got a call from Brian's assistant who said Brian's intrigued, he would like to know more. At which point your time stands still, your world sort of stops revolving and your mind is blown. And we thought, well look, if we could just have one meeting with him, then that would, even if he says no, that would be perfect. So we suggested that we go out for dinner with Anita, because it would be nice to see her again, and our director, who knew Anita really well, would come as well. And we just said, why don't we just go out, have a chat, talk about the project. If he's interested, great. If not, then as far as we're concerned, job done.
Yeah.
We'd met Brian May.
Yeah.
And we did. And we went to the restaurant, and Reese and I were trying to be very cool and very professional. And we said, don't say to Brian that we adore Queen and that we're massive fans. We're just all very professional. So then in he walks to the restaurant with Anita, and they come over. Anita comes over, gives a big hug, and she said, Brian, this is Simon and Reese, two of your biggest fans. It's like, oh. And he must have been thinking, what have I walked into, you know? But of course, you've met Brian.
Yeah.
He's very gracious. He's lovely. He'll chat about anything.
Yeah.
And we had an amazing evening, and it was great. And at the end of it, he said, no, I think this sounds like a lot of fun. I'll give it a go. I'm not sure what I can do for you, but I'll give it a go. And we're like, brilliant. So he agreed. But at that dinner, bizarrely, he's said that EMI, who they were with at the time, had just agreed a deal with Queen to start releasing stuff on DVD, because it was all the new rage. And they'd signed a deal, and they were going to start putting stuff out on DVD. So being fans, Reese and I just said, when you do, can you do Wembley and take off all those horrible 80s effects and put in all the songs that you cut out and all those bits, and there's loads of bonus things you could do. You could have it. And we just bombarded him with what we as fans really wanted to see on those DVDs. And again, he very patiently sat there and nodded and said yes. So the next morning I go into work, and there's an email waiting from Brian. It says, great to meet you last night. Looking forward to doing the theme tune for you. We'll set up a date in the studio, come over and we'll work on it. And also really loved your ideas about our DVDs. I think you guys should make them for us. And you think, and is that what? You know, what does that actually mean? And it snowballed. It literally snowballed from that moment. It was literally just one of those moments where you're in the right place at the right time, and somehow you managed to say the right thing. And it was at a time when they were going on this new adventure with DVDs, and I think they just were looking for someone different to be involved, someone with a different perspective. So we were then sent to meet Jim Beach, which was probably one of the scariest things I've ever done, because he's a bit of an enigma, is Jim. But he was very forthright, very direct, but very fair. And he said, well, yes, fine, but you need to meet Roger, because Roger has to agree to it as well. So then we were sent to meet Roger, and Roger was very laid back about the whole thing, said, yeah, like all your ideas, let's give it a go. So we were commissioned to work on the very first DVD, which was Greatest Video Hits 1. So that would have been around about now 2001, 2002. And I discovered very quickly with Queen that they are fiercely loyal to people, and if you do a really good job for them, and you get and understand how they work and what it's about, then they just keep asking you back. And here we are now, 25 years later, and I'm very lucky. They just keep asking me back. And I've been lucky enough to work on all manner of incredible things because of that. But it was just being in the right place at the right time. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, that's a great answer. No one wants to hear me speak anyway. So bored of me. No, how fantastic. And yeah, I mean, what a journey you've been on over that time.
Yeah.
And probably, like all of us that have ended up knowing Brian a little bit, obviously you know him far greater than I do, a small thing leads into something else, and you just kind of as a fan ask him, would you mind helping with this? And it escalates if he decides that he can trust you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is like that. But they are very open, and I still vividly remember that the day that we then went to the studio to record the theme tune, and it was him. He starts off playing the funeral march on the Red Special, and then goes off into this sort of piece that he composed, which was amazing. But to watch him do that multi-layered, guitar thing, where each time he plays something, you can't quite work out how that works, but in his head he knows exactly how it fits together. But having him stood there in front of you, holding that guitar, it was spine tingling, and I wasn't expecting it. It's really weird, but once you see it and you go, that's the guitar.
Oh yeah.
It is incredible, and there was a problem with the mixing desk. So poor Justin Shirley Smith, who was mixing it for us, was underneath it trying to sort something out. So Brian was just stood there and we were waiting, and he just started saying, "Oh, play that bit from, Doing All Right, or can you play that bit from Liar, or I think It's Late," we tried to get him to play. He was like, "It's late." He said, "I haven't played that since 1977. I can't remember. How does it go?" And it was just like a little jukebox that we got to just, but with Brian and the guitar, trying to remember his solos from 40 years ago.
How awesome.
It was great fun.
Justin's a nice chap too, isn't he?
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, got to know him and Chris and Josh really well over the years as well. And they're extraordinary people.
So, just going back to you as a Queen fan, one of the questions I generally ask people is, can you remember the first time you remember hearing a Queen song, and what was it?
Yeah, I remember now going back, the first single I ever had, was given to me, was Somebody to Love. And I often get asked, what is your favourite Queen song? And I don't think it's possible to have one. It depends what mood you're in, and then when you pick one, you then suddenly feel bad about all the other Queen songs that aren't. But I have to say, if my answer to that is if I could only ever listen to one Queen song again, it would be Somebody to Love, because for me, that's everything that's Queen in that, the harmonies. It's such an unusual song because it got that gospel flavour to it. The drumming is great. I love the bit where it's fine, need some, but with the drums is great. Fantastic guitar solo. So it's got everything. But I think the first album that I actually really wanted, because I was also a bit of a sci-fi nerd, was the Flash album. I remember sitting and listening to that over and over and over again. But then it was the Magic years that finally sort of drew me in.
Yeah. I remember I had the Flash album. I just would play it on repeat because the sound is just absolutely phenomenal. And
you saw, it was like, because in those days, we didn't have VHSs, so you couldn't see the film again. So it was like having the film again, wasn't it? You'd seen it in the cinema, and then you got to listen to the film again.
And it's crazy because I always talk about this a little bit in some respects in most podcasts, because there's a massive amount of new fans into Queen fandom and Brian fandom and Red Special fandom, which is absolutely amazing because it means that it'll carry on for forever. But back in the day, you could only listen to something if you bought the tape or if you had the album, and you might see one Queen film on TV when Freddie passed away, for example. They showed some footage from Wembley. That was the first time I'd personally ever seen that, and it was for like 10 seconds on a news thing. What's that? How do I get to see that?
How do I see it?
And you couldn't very easily get hold of it back then, and for it to be where it is now, I mean, for us to love Queen as much as we do, with the little information that we had and the little ability we had to listen and watch it, it was quite a magical time, because when you then got a new album, you played the whole thing and you realised that Queen had designed like a Night of the Opera or a Day at the Races. You don't just listen to a song, you listen to the whole album.
It's
and
a journey.
Each song feeds into the next one, and a lot of that's missed out in modern music, I think.
I couldn't agree more. I think, the songs weren't just randomly put in an order. That's constructed to take you on a musical journey. I mean, listening to the Flash album on shuffle is weird. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Hypnotic Seduction of Dale.
Exactly. So before you even met anyone, it's very weird. But but that's an anomaly. But absolutely, that sort of journey they take you on, and it is a shame. But I remember sort of going to buy the albums, and which one, because I can only afford one. Which one am I going to get? And you might see one or two songs on that you recognise because they were hits. But the joy of finding those album tracks was amazing. So I am always envious now of someone who's finding Queen for the first time, and you think, oh, you're about to go on this incredible journey. And but it's also fascinating what it is that draws. So what was it that got you into Queen? What was your entry point?
I meant to be asking you the question.
I know, sorry, but
No, no.
I always like knowing because it's
good.
It's different, isn't it?
So I'm trying to. So I remember watching. I was at my nan's house. I was watching Wayne's World, and the Bohemian Rhapsody in the car came on, and I was just, what is this music? This is something I need to find out. And I literally, cut a long story short, went home and asked my parents what was the music. And my dad, who I'd never known to love music, produced a cream-coloured Queen's Greatest Hits tape, which he gave me to play in my Sony Walkman.
Brilliant.
And I just listened to that Queen's Greatest Hits over and over and over again. And I used to get paid to cut the grass at home. And I found Don't Stop Me Now, which I just thought the guitar track in that is amazing.
Yeah.
And I worked out that on my Sony Walkman, when I was cutting the grass, if I wanted to play that, I would hit rewind for so many seconds whilst I was cutting the grass to hear the same song again. And I was so that I could just listen to, because I thought Don't Stop Me Now was the most amazing song in the world. And then time goes on and it's constantly always in your life, and then you get a job and you get money and you're like, oh, I wonder what else they do. And then DVDs came out and the internet took off, and you start going down the rabbit hole of all of that, and then you find the Red Special itself and Brian's story, and you're like, wow, this sounds like something you couldn't even make up for a movie. It's
an extraordinary story, it really is, every element of it. So
what was it about Queen that got you? Obviously Somebody to Love, but
I think it was of course it's the music. I mean, I found that I didn't really need to listen to anything else, because whatever I needed musically, whatever mood I was in, I could find it in Queen. But I think I just was drawn to the intelligence of them. It was such an incredible combination of four people, all incredibly intelligent, and everything they did was considered and planned. There's nothing's by mistake. I've talked to people in the past, about Roger's drumming, and just when he hits a cymbal or something, and then the next time around he doesn't, that's not a mistake. There's a reason for it.
I couldn't agree more. You listen to some of the tracks, obviously Tie Your Mother Down, they don't play the same bit twice, even though the song is the same, the chorus is the same, it's never played the same twice. They always add something different into it to make it a little bit more interesting, add a little different flavour to it, make you go on a slightly different journey with it. It's
and I love the way that they never did the same thing again. They always, you listen to the early Queen albums and they're it's night and day to some of their later stuff. I mean, but there is still this core Queen sound. And I think for me, what was great about seeing when The Miracle came out, and the first time I heard I Want It All, it almost felt, we've come back, because it was just a heavy rock track with a great guitar riff and thumping drums and Freddie belting out and John locked in on the bass. But just also the way they approached everything, each time it was bigger, it was better, it was bolder, and I just used to love getting into debates with my friends at school, because they were never cool. If you liked Queen, you were not cool.
I used to get ridiculed on the bus for listening to it, because no one else my age was into it.
But we're still here now. And where are they with their cool bands? We're still here. We were right all along.
Definitely were. 100% were. Look who we've got to work with.
Exactly. And they're still going strong. We were right all those years. I want to go back to being a teenager and say, one day you will see.
I was saying on the way up, because my friend Aidan's driven me up, who I work with outside of, and he was asking me how all this started, and I was just saying it started for me in my late teens, and if I'd have been able to go back in time, think about where I'd got to now with everything, and go back and tell myself, I wouldn't have believed that this would have ever happened.
No.
You must.
It's mine. Yeah, I pinch myself on a regular basis. It's sort of, it's that kind of thing. It gets you at weird moments, because when you're, you've experienced, when you're with Brian and you're working on something, it becomes a thing of work, and you're in that. You're focused and you're doing it, and everyone's doing their thing, and then every now and again you just go, what the hell is this is insane. But it's yeah. Oh God, can you imagine going back to your teenage self and saying, you know, one day? I mean, I've been so lucky with the things that I've done, and you know, standing on the side of the stage, watching them perform, you know, to however many tens of thousands of people, and feeling that sort of energy is extraordinary.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So obviously you worked with the DVDs, which you talked about, and you started off, and you looking through your back catalogue, you've pretty much worked since they started doing it on everything they've ever brought out.
Yes.
So thank you for that.
Oh, no, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure.
But as fans, I think it's important that we say thank you, because without your view on where that should go, we wouldn't have had some of the bonus features and extras. And I'm sure if they hadn't found the right people to work with, it wouldn't have manifested in the way that it has, or possibly kept up with the momentum that it had. So thank you, because
I appreciate that.
I often use the DVDs in my collection to indoctrinate my wife into Queen.
That's what they're for. It's propaganda. Yeah, exactly.
But you know, and it's stuff that when you're feeling a certain way, you can go and sit down and put a Queen concert on in the background and watch it, and you know you're there, aren't you? I'm far too young to have seen them at Wembley or Live at the Bowl or any of those things, but it's nice to be able to put them on. I've completely forgot where I was going with that question.
Well,
now.
just on that, to give you a chance to remember, I think what's so lovely about, you know, being able to work on something like the DVD, so we have it and we can watch it again and again, and you can get really up close and personal, is you really see the dynamic between them, and it just makes you love them even more, because there's those sort of moments where they look at each other and it's silent communication, and there's this wonderful moment during Another One Bites the Dust where Brian, Roger and John sort of go into almost like a holding pattern with the rhythm, so Freddie can go off and, you know, mess around with the audience and so forth. And there's a bit where you just see Brian and Roger look at each other as if to go, where are we?
Yeah.
And Roger's like, I don't know. And I've no idea. And then they just sort of like keep going. And then Freddie looks back and he goes, are you ready? And it's all like, oh, okay, right, we're doing it now. And it's just sort of, when you're there, you probably don't notice that because you're too far away. But when you see it up close, as I say, it makes you love them even more, because it makes you realise this is really live. This is musicians who know each other inside out, have the confidence to just play with it. And what you are getting is unique to any other night, and that's what makes them special.
This is great things, because when you're at a concert, you're so far away from any of that to actually see what's going on stage, or feel that energy and see those little interactions that they're doing, or even what they do if they break a string or something goes wrong, for example, and how that's managed. Or if Brian, I remember at the Boston gig, Brian threw Peter a slide and he missed it. And then you see Pete crawling across the stage with a torch whilst they're still playing, trying to find the slide. All those things that you don't see if you're there, depending on where you are, you can kind of recapture them. And often you know, it's lovely when you go to a gig to not film it with your own phone and to enjoy it.
Be the moment,
be present.
Absolutely, yeah.
But knowing that you've got the backup of having something to go and watch to remember how you felt and see all those bits is just special. So it's really important that you've done that work.
Well, no, it is. It's lovely to try and capture it, but I think you're right. When you're at the concert, you just have to enjoy the live experience, because it is genuinely live. And again, it comes down to sort of that insistence that that it is raw and it's live and it's dangerous and things could go wrong, but it doesn't matter.
No.
But I know they beat themselves up about it because they want the show to be perfect, because they're perfectionists. But I think you're right, for an audience, it just makes you feel like, it just reminds you that this isn't staged, managed and choreographed. This is just brilliant musicianship.
So when did you get involved in, I guess you started with the DVDs, worked through, and then you've ended up going to live gigs and being on tour. Have you been on your timeline, were you on the Paul Rogers era?
I was around with Paul. I never sort of went on tour, but I was involved in filming the concert that then became the Return of the Champions DVD. Would help with getting a lot of the footage that they then used on the screens on the tour. Films from rehearsals that they did for their second tour. So yeah, sort of been around it, and again that was great because it was sort of seeing them back on stage, doing it, and it was an interesting one with Paul because Paul was great at certain bits of the catalogue, but not on others, didn't suit his voice, and so Brian and Roger would then do. So you've got this really clever mix of Roger singing some, Brian singing some, Paul doing some, and it was a really good show, and it was just lovely seeing them back out on the road again. But
I remember some of the criticism that came at the time because people were saying, "Well, it's not Freddie," and I just thought it's just another opportunity to see Brian and Roger play together. Why wouldn't you just go and watch it and see it? And
it was just because you won't hear that music live, and that was the best way of doing it. And I thought it was a really smart move to do it with someone who was a successful musician in their own rights. So it was Queen plus Paul Rogers, and getting Brian to do All Right Now. It sort of I think it gave it validity. Yeah, it wasn't Freddie, and we would all much rather it was Freddie, of course, but that's not possible. And so the next best thing is having Brian and Roger keeping me. And again, I think they've been vindicated for doing it because the music's still so much a part of our lives now, and that is because they work so hard to keep it alive.
So you said you got involved in the videoing of the Paul Rogers, and then when Adam Lambert came along, because obviously I'm kind of sort of met you-ish, didn't really, but in Boston.
In Boston on the North American tour,
sat next to your wife for the whole gig and didn't have the courage to say hello.
Oh, she's scary.
No, I think we spoke a little bit, but I didn't say who I was. She said, "Oh, my husband's filming this." But I was just like, I'm a complete imposter sat in this section of no one knows who I am. I'm wearing a Red Special Guitar podcast t-shirt. Just be looking again, who's this nut job who's managed to get a ticket to sit here? But you were there filming.
Yeah.
And you were using an iPhone.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So we're having a conversation about doing some backstage filming to sort of see how the tour evolved from when they start rehearsing with Adam right up to then touring around North America. And we were looking at ways of doing it, and the trouble is once you start taking cameras and sound people around, you get a crew, it starts to become quite intrusive, and people inherently behave differently when there's a camera around. You just do, because you're aware that you're being filmed. Whereas nowadays, we're used to mobile phones being out and capturing moments all the time, so we're much more relaxed with it. And the quality of the iPhone now is extraordinary. You can shoot in 4K, which is just as good as any other camera. It has its limitations, but I put together a kit with some extra lenses attached, and I had a gimbal so it could be smooth. And they very kindly let me sort of follow them. Not for every show, because again, they needed to have space away, but it was just a case of, well, let's just film backstage and just try and get a flavour of what it's like being on the road with Queen and Adam, and that's what we did. And it was fascinating to see the show come together, because it is very much built in that rehearsal process. And then there was a week in Baltimore before the first show where they were doing production rehearsals, so what was appearing on the screens was constantly being updated and modified. Set lists were changing around, and so you saw it sort of come to life. And then that experience of the first night and seeing the show done its entirety to an audience, and the band gauging where it's working, where it wasn't, and then tweaking it, was fascinating to watch. And it was just a very fascinating tour, because in some cases it was very repetitive because they were playing arenas and these arenas do ice hockey or they do basketball or something, and they all look identical. But then you get somewhere like Madison Square Garden, and then they did the Grand Prix weekend in Austin, so you're in the middle of a racetrack, and I think it was about 80,000 people or something like that there. So that was a completely bonkers sort of part of the tour. But we've got all that footage, and it's in the archive, and we'll do something with it one day. But lovely to sort of watch that and see them at work. On tour.
I guess properly at work as well. As in, especially being such a Queen fan, seeing them have those discussions about, I guess, what song goes next and which one they're going to axe and when they're going to change various bits and pieces of how they interact with different songs and lighting and smoke, and Brian up doing his solo for 3 days and
exactly. But it was
those.
But it was also, again, what we talk about with the albums. It was the journey they want people to go on, and there was this sort of story about it's machines versus humans, and the songs that were picked sort of loosely fed into that. I mean, it's an opportunity to play the hits, but there was very much a sort of a theme running through it, which if you look close enough you can follow. So there's that attention to detail, but also you remember they did this fantastic sort of almost country and western style version of Tie Your Mother Down. And seeing the reaction to that, particularly when we got to Nashville,
I can imagine.
was fantastic. And it was, again, people felt that's unique to that tour.
Definitely. It's such a great thing to see, and I think it is I was lucky enough to go over. I saw them twice at Boston. Once sat with your wife, and another time sat to the side of the stage. And it was great to see the two different nights, because they were different both nights as well, because they changed some things that hadn't gone right. Brian had a malfunction with the guitar shooting the sparks at the end on the first night, and Pete, who I'd caught up with before the second night, said they couldn't fire it because he wasn't stood in the right place.
Right.
And you'd had to tell him, boss, you weren't stood in the right place after he's kicking off it.
Because it wasn't work.
It's quite interesting, because you see them, or I still do, as these wonderful people that are doing this highly produced wonderful thing, but you forget sometimes they are just normal people as well, and they're trying to achieve something, and they might not feel it went as well as they wanted it to. Even if you enjoyed it, so it's the human side of them.
No, completely. I've never been able to. For me, it always sounds amazing. But then they come off and go, that was, and I go, really? I mean, sometimes when you see the same show several times, you do spot things and go, okay, that's not what you meant. But I think they can do whatever they like, can't they? They can get up there, but what's interesting, I think, is obviously touring has changed dramatically over the years, technically wise, but also for them as well. It's very different now as to, I'm sure, it was back in the 70s and 80s. But then so much of it is the same, the routine of it. They sound checked every single night. Even if they were in the same venue for a second night, they would sound check. It's that attention to detail. They test everything before a show, so that they're giving themselves the best chance of it all going perfectly. Of course you can't be perfect every night, but it's not through lack of trying.
No, it's really interesting. Brian came to the Red Special meetup last year in October, which was absolutely fantastic. And
I saw the videos.
He turned up, and it was a long convoluted story as to whether or not he was going to turn up or not. He did. We only found out on that day, like an hour before he turned up, of course.
Sweet. Excellent.
No one knew, and we kind of introduced him. He came in through a curtain, and he started talking. He spent like 4 hours with us. But one of the things that was really interesting is near the end of the chat, he starts talking about when he was struggling a little bit with his mental health, and how he'd been, and each had told him to only focus on the things you could, like, control what you can control. Only focus on those things, and if it doesn't go well, you've done everything you've tried to do to get it to go right. But if it, to make sure that you only focus on what you can do, not the things that are outside of it, which just goes completely in line with what you're saying about how fastidious they are in making sure they've tested everything as much as they can, probably to give themselves that opportunity to know that they've done what they can do to put on the best show they can, and if it goes wrong, it's just one of those things.
It's just one of those things, absolutely. And and they are incredibly fair in that respect. You know, they accept and they respect people who hold their hands up and say, "Oh yeah, that was me."
Yeah.
And it won't happen again. You know, that sort of approach. What they're less tolerant of is people who then start blaming other people or other things, and it's sort of like, because it's sort of like, you know, mistakes happen.
Definitely.
We all make them, but own them. I think.
Definitely. I think it's honesty is a massive, integrity is a massive thing, and being in a position of trust is huge with them. So this is the Red Special Guitar Podcast.
Yes.
So we haven't really touched on the guitar, but can you remember finding out that Brian, obviously being a Queen fan, there's that point where you go, he made his guitar with his dad when he was 16. Can you remember when that was? Yeah,
that would have been watching the Magic Years videos when they came out. And there was a whole section there, a little interview with him and his dad talking about making it. And you know, it's just, again, you go, oh yeah, of course he did. Yeah. He's Brian, of course he did. Not only did he make his own guitar, but he made it so special. And when you then look into it a bit more, and you start to realise that all of those different sounds that he was able to create were through that guitar, it is staggering. It is quite a lot to take on, isn't it? And so it was from that, and then of course you start looking into it, and then you listen to the songs again, and you realise, oh, that wasn't a synthesizer. That was the Red Special. Yeah. I've always loved the story of when they did Crazy Little Thing Called Love, and apparently Brian was in the studio for hours trying to make the Red Special sound like a Fender, and he couldn't. And then I think it was Roger said, "Why don't you just play a Fender?" And it was sort of like, "Oh, okay." But I love the fact that Brian, you know, was determined to try and make the Red Special do it. But so that's its Achilles heel. Yeah. But I don't think it's a problem that it doesn't sound like a Fender
at all. It's a fantastic instrument, and I always think, you go back in time, it was 60 years old in October last year, the guitar. And it stood the test of time. He's only ever played the one instrument for the whole of his career. Yeah. It's been around the world more times than most people. Played at every live show, on every album, on every single, pretty much, barring Crazy Little Thing Called Love.
Yeah.
You've been in the room with it. I'm sure you've picked it up and messed around with it, and probably
very, very carefully.
Can you remember the first time you got to pick it up and see it, and what anything distinctly different about it that you
It was noticed? A long time before I actually held it. I was in the room with it very early on, as I said, the second time that I met Brian. You know, he was there playing it, and it seems very weird to say, doesn't it? But it has an aura about it for exactly those reasons you've just outlined. You know, all of those things that's been achieved with it. So it was on a stand, and I think I touched it, but that was it. And I didn't want to hold it, because it's like a baby. You go, I can't. What if I drop it? I don't want to be that guy. So it is. And when you see it in the flesh, as it were, it is extraordinary. The thing that's always struck me about it, though, is not so much when you look at it, it's when you hear it. Yeah. Without him playing it, you walk into a room and the amps are on, and you get that hiss. Yeah. That's something special. And but then much later, Pete did let me, persuaded me to hold it, and I didn't for very long, because again I just got incredibly sweaty and nervous. But it's just really fun every time it opens the case. It's almost like light comes out of the case and there's a heavenly choir singing. It's ridiculous.
It definitely is. It's a really odd thing. I think it definitely has an aura about itself. Yeah, and it's almost like it's another member of the band.
Definitely.
And it's hard to explain what it's like to play it in a flesh. So Brian brought it to the meetup, and he let people Steve Pryor. He brought Steve Pryor along,
Right.
and Steve was letting people look at it and not hold it, but like touch it and taste it and
exactly.
hug it and all those things. And a couple of us are allowed to play it, and I'm very lucky to play the guitar at Brian's house through his full rig with Pete. Which
Must be amazing.
It was, and then you stop, and then driving home, you start thinking, I just played that thing that's been on the roof of Buckingham Palace at Live Aid at Wembley, and that kind of blows your mind. But it's like another person.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, you want it to be able to talk because it'll have some stories.
Yeah.
But I recently did some interview pieces with the Queen Extravaganza that are out on tour at the moment, and Nick Radcliffe, who has the enviable task of being the Brian of the band, said that he'd been lucky enough to have a go on the Red Special, and he said he found it quite hard to play because the neck is thicker.
It's really thick,
and he said, so you've got to have the long fingers to make it work. So I think it's interesting that not only is it a unique guitar, but it's actually quite a challenge to play, which makes, what Brian does even more remarkable. But I remember when we were working on one of the documentaries we were doing, and we came across this footage from the 77 tour that Bob Harris had filmed, and there was Roger was stood with the Red Special playing it, and I wondered if Brian knew that he'd done that. It was almost like, were you allowed to touch it? It looked really weird seeing it in someone else's hands.
Is that a photo of Freddie holding it as well?
Yeah.
It circles the internet, and everyone's always questioning what's going on there.
Yeah.
I think the crazy thing with it is, though, having played it myself, is I still sound like me. And
that's interesting. Okay.
Obviously, it's got that AC30 Brian May-ish sound, but I think the real magic is Brian with the guitar, obviously.
Yeah, but then we've seen Brian play other guitars, and it's still extraordinary. So yes, of course, but it's just that other thing with the story of Queen that just makes them so fascinating. That on top of everything, there is this guitar that is, as you say, another member of the band, and it just adds to the wonderfulness of their story and what makes them unique.
I think if you ever spoken to Brian about it, and because I always get this. I mean, he mentioned, so the first he came into the meetup, and we talked about it a lot because he turned up. He comes through the doors, he says, "Oh my God, what's going on here?" And someone shouts, "This is your fault." And then the next thing he says, "If my dad was here to see this."
Yeah.
And you could see the emotion in him of, we're just a bunch of very special geeks in a room that love the guitar, but it clearly meant something to him, and the guitar is clearly partly a reminder of his dad.
I think you're right. Yes, I think there is a connection there because it was something they did together.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's irreplaceable, isn't it? I mean, you can't put a value on that.
No.
For us as fans, but for him as well, I do think. But it must be like a child for him, I guess, or a partner. I don't know. It's extraordinary.
So have you ever spoken to him about it?
Yeah, we have talked about it a lot over the years, mainly because I have loads of questions about what it's like to play and how he came up with it, and he sort of talked very fondly about remembering about how they had to come up with ways of making various coils and things to go in it because they didn't have the tools to do it, so they had to adapt. And yes, that is a bit of a knitting needle and all of that. Although all those sort of myths are true. But I think it's sort of a part of him, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it has sort of become legendary, and the reaction you get. I remember when he did his tour with Kerry Ellis, the Candlelit tour, and he started that off on the acoustic guitar. And then there's the moment where he goes, "Oh, I do have someone," and out comes the Red Special, and you just felt the room just sort of gasp. I mean, are there any other guitars that do that? I don't think so.
To that extent,
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think it's got to be one of the most famous
guitars.
It's the most unique for sure. But yeah, it's just a special thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's aptly titled, isn't it? But it is extraordinary the sound that he can get out of it. I mean, as you know, I used to be involved in the Queen podcast, and when we were talking about Highlander and how it even sounded like bagpipes at one point, you think, I can't think of any other guitar that's been made to sound like a bagpipe.
It's another great film with a whole Queen score.
Oh, brilliant! Absolutely, yeah. Devoured that when I was younger.
That's a great film. I think they're remaking it, aren't they?
I keep hearing rumours. Yeah,
It won't be the same.
well, not if they haven't got Queen all over it.
No. Simon, is there any specific standout moments for you in your time that like you really either had to pinch yourself or you've become very aware of who you're talking, because I've seen you interview Brian at live events and numerous times where you kind of stop and you like the room explodes around you and you're like, oh shit, I'm actually here talking to Brian May in front of all these people. You got any good stories about that?
Yes, I mean, well, it's as you say, interviewing Brian is one of the easiest things in the world. As you've experienced, is you ask him a question and he'll just go, which is a joy. But yeah, there's been loads of moments, but I think quite a recent one, and it wasn't at the time; it was only afterwards. When he reissued Back to the Light as part of his Gold series, and he asked me if I would help do a video for Back to the Light, and he said, I really want to somehow play with my younger self. So we came up with this idea for the video where he's this time traveller who goes back to the Brixton Academy, although we couldn't actually sadly get into Brixton, so we had to use the Hammersmith Apollos then, which he did play, so technically it worked. And we sort of took the footage from him playing Back to the Light live, and then refilmed him now, and then put the two of them together. And so we went into a studio in front of a green screen to get all the new stuff so that we could put that into the old footage. And again, it was a great day, and Brian worked really hard, and it was knackering, but we got everything we needed to. And I hadn't realised, but someone had been taking photos, and they sent me, and there's one photo of Brian stood on the stage holding the guitar, but he's got his arms crossed on it like that, and I'm stood looking up at him, with Mike, and we're obviously chatting about what he's doing. And it's when you look at that photo you thought, oh my god, I was there directing Brian in a video, and the guitar's there, and he's stood there, and he's thinking about it, and and it's almost like that out of body experience when you look back and you go, oh yeah, that was me. That was quite a sort of a moment where I stopped and thought, wow. And I was so pleased with how that video turned out, because if you allow yourself to suspend disbelief, it does look like the problem with that is that we said, okay, so in this moment we've got young Brian, and now we've got, I can't call him old Brian, because that doesn't, so we had to sort of have then Brian and now Brian, which just seemed a bit weird, but we couldn't bring ourselves to call him old Brian.
No, not at all.
That's not right.
No, he wouldn't have liked that either.
No, exactly, and that's wrong. But yeah, so that was quite a moment.
Yeah, I think definitely when I can, not to the same level at all, but when you're with him, talking to him, you're at work.
Yes.
And then you stop and look back and go, oh, that was really me there doing that with him or talking to him. I think you definitely can feel that sort of sense of disbelief that that's yourself.
That's right, yeah, and there have been times when he's been so amazing in, when the pandemic first came, I got COVID, and I had a lovely phone call from him, unprompted, saying, oh my God, how are you? Are you all right? Is everything okay? Do you need, which was lovely. He didn't need to do that, but he does things like that. And very sadly, my mum passed away around the tour in North America that we were talking about, so I had to leave the tour early to get back. And thanks to them, I was able to get back in time. But again, lots of calls and messages from him asking how I was, which was lovely, and Roger as well. But it's it's moments like that where you realise that you are part of the family, which is obviously a privilege and an honour.
Well, I think you wouldn't be there if you hadn't earned their trust and done the right things, and you're there on merit. Right. So you've got to stop and remind yourself that you're there for those things for a reason, and it's a good reason. And it's very hard sometimes to take stock and pat yourself on the back, but we're not built to do that, are we?
Especially
in this country.
No, exactly. No, that feels wrong. I think you're right. They have a way that they like to work, and if you fit into that mould, then it's an extremely rewarding and enjoyable place to be.
So, is there anything else that you can tell us that you're working on? Or can you say you're working on stuff that you can't tell us about?
There's loads of stuff. I mean, the Queen machine rolls on gloriously. It rolls on because there's a demand for it. I think Brian and Roger have repeatedly said, as long as people want us to keep doing stuff, then we will. And that demand doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon. In fact, it feels now that they're bigger now than they have been at any time since we lost Freddie. But so there's lots going on. There's lots that we'd like to do. It's just all got to fit into place, really. There's concerts that would be lovely to revisit. So there's a really nice healthy mix of going back and glorying in what they did with Freddie, and then the new stuff that they're constantly doing. And I think I don't think it'll be long before something exciting happens now with Brian and Roger. So we'll wait and keep our fingers crossed and look forward to it. Yeah.
So as fans, we've still got lots of things to look forward to.
Definitely.
And lots of things to collect and buy and go and see.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's still stories to tell.
Yeah.
Things to go and revisit again. And I think what's nice now is that we sort of remember that there's a global audience who is continually finding Queen. So it's a lovely opportunity to sort of take them on a journey, but at the same time find those things that maybe even the longest of Queen fans might not know.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time for sure.
Definitely, and I think also I think it's wonderful that you've got something like what you do with this podcast, that you can just bring people together with a shared love of one tiny aspect of Queen, which it's not a tiny aspect, it's a huge part, but one aspect of Queen in the guitar, and you build this community of people who just are all drawn to the same thing, that they are fascinated by this incredible instrument.
Definitely, and I think the great thing with it is, and what I've been keen to push, is that we all have this wonderful interest in this thing that is the guitar that's produced this music that means so much to all of us, but it might be slightly different because we all have a different reason to love Somebody to Love or whatever the song may be. But for me, the really important thing is getting people together that love the thing in a room and having a conversation and sharing in that joy of the thing in person, as the internet often separates us. As much as it brings us together, we're hidden behind keyboards and screens, so getting people in a room together is really important.
I completely agree. And the number of friends I've made because you realise that they like Queen too, or they like, and it's great, and it's a shared. It's the same as going to a football match, isn't it? You all come from different walks of life, but at that moment you were all joined in the love of the same thing, and it's great. So yes, you're a positive part of the internet.
Yeah, we're trying to be.
Yeah,
trying to make it as positive a place as it can be.
Yeah,
and it's just great bringing people together, meeting people with different stories, and everyone has their own first memory of the songs they heard, or when they first learned Brian built the guitar, or the first time they saw him, or met him, or saw the band play with or without Fred, and their own interactions. It's such a rich story, just even outside of, when you look outside of the band themselves,
Yeah.
but the fandom itself is huge, and there's so many ways it goes off into and shoots off. So I've started looking into stereo photography recently, because it's absolutely, when you actually stop and then start looking into it, it's absolutely fascinating. And
Yes.
that's only because Brian's interested in it. You even get slightly like, what is this thing? I'll have a look at that, and then you're like, wow, why haven't I known about this?
Well, yeah, absolutely, and yes, of course, he's the leading expert in it. Which, but yeah, and we had an amazing week in the Canary Islands for the Another World album, where we went because I'd always wanted to visit that tree.
The tree, yeah.
And so when the Another World came out on the Gold series, I think it's probably the only time I've persuaded Brian to do something purely for me.
Yeah.
Is to say, I want to go and see the tree,
Yeah.
and I'd love to film you going back to the tree. And fortunately, he thought that was a good idea and agreed, and we had an amazing time. But it wasn't just about the tree and celebrating the album. It was taking him back to the observatory that he'd been at, and then hearing him pour out this sort of fascination for the stars again. I mean, so much of it is over my head, but he's fascinating to talk to about that as well.
So I live down in Devon, quite close to Sidmouth, which is where Brian used to go on holiday. And my daughter, literally 2 weeks ago, went to the Norman Lockyer Observatory, which is the first one Brian went to, where he got his first love of the stars. So he's constantly I'm constantly reminded of him through whatever's going on.
Yeah.
And my daughter was able to tell the teacher that, my dad knows Brian May. Yes, I'm sure he knows.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
He goes, no, he really does. Yeah. Met him in everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do your children think of your journey, and do they get it, or do they not really?
Yeah, they do. I mean, they've had no choice.
Yeah.
It's just part of what we do, isn't it? Is we brainwash them from a very early age. It's very funny. But interesting, their way into sort of Queen was going to see the musical when it was at Tottenham Court Road, because for them it wasn't just, here's some old music that Dad keeps playing. It was something they could connect with and see live, and so I think that's when they finally got what the music could do when you hear it live, because the bands that they had playing it at the musical were incredible. So that was a real moment for them, and so they like Queen. They like you can't not really, can you? There's going to be at least one song in there. So it does always make me smile when they have their own sort of Queen story to tell because of a song that they've used. My son told a story that when he, because he's a firefighter, and when he went for his training course, they said, they asked everyone, if you were a boxer and you were coming out into the boxing ring, what song would you have playing? And my son chose I Want It All. He said, I'd come out to I Want It All. And they were like, okay, fine. And it was, they dressed it up as if it was an icebreaker, to get people's music taste and so forth. But when he graduated and he went up to get his certificate, they played I Want It All. So you get little moments like that, which is lovely. And but of course, sort of, Brian has been part of their lives ever since they were born. So it's a weird thing for them. Where I think it was when they were at secondary school and they suddenly became aware of other people idolising Queen and Brian, that they suddenly went, what, that guy that Dad works with? And it's sort of the penny dropped.
Awesome. Is there anything else I have not asked you that you feel like you would like to talk about or say?
I don't think so. We've covered quite a lot, haven't we? I hope it's been interesting.
Oh, very. It's fascinating hearing what you've been involved in. And we'll put links to stuff, and probably put your IMDb page in and your website and anything else that you want to put in in the description and talk about. And we'll try and get, if you could send me a photograph of yourself to use as the thumbnail, that would be amazing. I'm sure I can do that. No, I think we've
I'll think of 100 things once you've gone.
Yeah.
But then that's sort of law, isn't it?
Well, that's the way it goes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, you never know. We might bump into you somewhere else. And
Yeah, well, now we know each other. Now we're all friends. It's
grab 10 minutes.
Exactly,
To you and getting some more stories.
and you'll find out my wife is lovely and not
I'm
scary.
pretty sure she was to me, to be honest. She was really nice. I just felt like a fraud sat where I was because I was like, I shouldn't be sat here.
Yeah.
Pete gave me a ticket, you see, and so I was sat there on my own in a foreign country thinking, what's this all about?
Yeah.
And I should have not worn a podcast t-shirt.
Did you ever meet Phil, Brian's driver?
Not properly,
Oh, right.
but I did have a very brief interaction with him.
Yeah, because he was great. I loved him, and he always used to make me laugh. And I was in a similar set where I'd gone to see a show at the O2, and I'd taken the family, and so I was very much, I'm a Queen fan, watching this, not working.
Yeah.
And they were doing In the Lap of the Gods Revisited, and so we were all doing the Woe Woe La La Las, and I'm fully going for it. And I was on the front row on the side, and I looked down, and Phil was stood looking up at me. Doing this, and he just shook his head. It was just one of those moments where I thought, yeah, but you know what? Today I'm a fan, and I don't care.
Well, we're all fans to start with, aren't we?
Yeah, it was just like, Lupton, what are you doing?
Having fun.
I'm having fun, Phil.
Enjoying myself.
Yeah, he's sadly missed. He was great.
Yeah.
Really great.
No, it was a really difficult time, wasn't it? Because Brian was in Boston, New York, Boston, when that happened, obviously, to carry on.
That was really. I don't know quite how he managed that. I mean, he had no choice. The show has to go on.
Yeah.
But that would have been really, really hard.
Yeah, not easy at all. But again, just showing how professional he is. And
because it would have disappointed thousands of people if he'd not pulled it together. But because I was filming the Elvis walk, as they call it, which is the bit where the band leave the band room and walk, around the back and into to the stage just before the show starts. And as he walked past, he just turned around and looked right down the camera and went, "This one's for Phil." Yeah. And it was sort of, it's sort of like, oh, blimey. So yeah, that was quite special. So he was, Phil was very much in his mind as he was doing that. But and then you hear the roar of the crowd.
And there you go. Yeah.
And there you go. Yeah. I guess that carries you through anything.
Yeah, there's some magic moments in that as well. And I know that Brian playing Love of My Life and Freddie turning up, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But every time it happens, I get the hairs on the back of my neck come up, and I know it's happening. Yeah. And I still get emotional. And I think the whole room does. But it's just such a wonderful thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, there are moments, definitely. I remember a couple of times when Adam did Who Wants to Live Forever and hits those notes, and you see Brian just sort of just does that. It's like, oh.
And Adam's son, I think, again, the criticism Adam got originally, but it's just so worth going to see. Yeah,
it was going to be whoever stood there and sang the songs. It was going to be compared to Freddie, and it's not fair to do that.
No,
because Freddie was totally unique. Yeah. But I think that combination with Adam has been terrific, because it means we get to go and hear the music live and done at a very high level.
Definitely, I think the one tell you can always get is if you really study Roger and Brian when they're playing, quite often they're smiling.
Yeah.
And they're enjoying it.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't want someone in their mid-70s playing music to be enjoying themselves?
Yeah.
And for what they've given us.
Yeah.
You kind of feel like they've earned the right to be up there doing what they want to, the way they want to, and still entertaining us. So fair play to them.
Yeah, I love those moments you see when they laugh or smile at each other on stage. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's sort of, that's what it should be about, isn't it? Because if they're having fun, then we're going to.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Constantly doing. Hopefully we'll have some more fun.
I'm sure something. I don't think they're quite ready yet to hang up the live guitar and the live sticks.
Let's hope not.
No, let's hope not. Yeah, absolutely. Keeps us busy
Yeah,
anyway.
it's something to do, isn't it? Well, and it's
Exactly.
more opportunities to bump into each other.
Exactly.
So they've got to do it for that,
If
for
nothing
no
else.
reason.
Yeah, you have to do it for us.
Yeah.
Quite frankly.
So we can get together again.
Exactly.
Brian, if you're watching,
He really won't be.
he won't be. Definitely not.
No.
Simon, it's been an absolute pleasure.
I've really
Thank you
enjoyed
for-
chatting to you too. And,
Really nice to get to know your story as well.
thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for hosting.
It's a pleasure.
We'll put loads of links and information about you below. And if you've enjoyed watching this, then make sure you check out all of Simon's work. If you see him, you know where he's done a lot of stuff that you'll have enjoyed. And if you see him, make sure you go and say hello.
Please do. It's always nice to talk to another Queen fan.
And we'll have to invite you to the Red Special Meetup.
Yes, please. Yeah.
So
I hear they're all right.
You're officially invited. I'll let you know off camera when the date is.
Yes.
And
I'd love to
make sure you're
come.
there.
Love to come.
Yeah.
That would be brilliant.
Brilliant. Thanks, Simon.
Lovely to see you. Thank you so much.